Good evening, my dear friends, joining us globally from all over the world. I'm going to begin this evening's class with an anecdotal story that they tell about the Dubner Maggid. The Maggid, the famous legendary Maggid of Dubner, he once came to a town, and as his custom was, he wanted to present a lecture, and he always had metaphors and anecdotes and stories to describe every idea and every point. But there was a group of youngsters there who had a lot of audacity and chutzpah, and they refused to let him talk in shul. They were of a more, what they used to call a more enlightened type of maskilim, and they did not want to hear the Dubner Maggid's words of rebuke and the ethics and teachings and so forth. So he turned to them and he said, "A story, you'll let me say, just a story?" They said, "If it's only a story, we'll let you tell the story." So the Dubner Maggid says, "Let me tell you a story. There was once a man who came to a town claiming that he has a mantra, a special mystical code through which he can silence and paralyze or kill forever any dangerous, threatening dog. There was a Jew who came over to him and said, my neighbor has a bunch of dogs, and they drive me mad. They don't stop barking all day and all night. When I enter into the house, when I leave the house, it's frightening, it's disturbing. Maybe you can go there and say your special lachash, your mantra, and just kill them once and for all." The mystic says, "Not a problem. It's going to cost you 50,000 ruble. He says, "I'll tell you it's expensive, but it's well worth it." And he gives him the 50,000 ruble, and that night he's supposed to go to the dogs and do his mantra and finish them off. The next day, he sees the man in shul. And he's very upset. The man who gave the money is very upset. Why is he upset? He went out of his house that morning and the dogs were barking as usual. He comes to shul, he's furious. He wants to scream at this man. He looks at him, he sees Nebach. He's zerbrochen and zerstochen and zerhackt and verwundet. He's wounded, his whole body is wounded, he's bleeding. He says, "What happened? What happened?" He says, "I'll tell you. I went to the dogs." He says, "But I thought you have a mantra. He says, "I have a mantra, but they attacked me and they wounded me." He said, "But why didn't you say it and silence them and kill them?" He said in Yiddish, "Da seinen azelche hint, was losen nicht ausreden a Wort." These are such types of dogs that they don't let you even speak a single word. The Dubner Maggid concluded his story. I share with you this story as an introduction to the theme of our class this evening. And first I want to say that the class tonight is dedicated in honor of the Bas Mitzvah of Dvorah Shanowitz. Mazel tov, Dvorah. May you continue to be a source of pride and bring much nachas to your parents, your family, and all of the Jewish people, and enjoy a beautiful, successful, happy, wholesome, and meaningful life. So the Talmud, the Gemara, tells the story of the death of one of the most extraordinary individuals in Jewish history. A man who the Tanakh discusses more than any other figure, somebody who passed away on Shavuos, King David HaMelech. Chazal tell us, Meis Ba'atzeres. David died on the holiday of Shavuos. It was also Shabbos. That dear Shavuos was on Shabbos, and that's when David HaMelech dies. And the Gemara Masechta Shabbos Daf Lamed dedicates space to tell us and to describe David's death. And if you'll open up source number 1 in your PDF curriculum right below the video, you'll see the story in the original Gemara. The Gemara there tells the story that David HaMelech wanted to know when he's going to die. Hoidi'eni Hashem kitzu midas yomai mahi, he says in Tehillim Lametes. Hashem, God, refuses to tell him. Finally, after negotiations, Jewish style, God tells David, "You're going to die on Shabbos." On the holy day of Shabbos, b'Shabbos Tammuz. And David HaMelech makes sure that on the day of Shabbos, he does not cease to learn Torah for even a single moment. And when his time came, he was 70 years old, the angel of death could not approach him because he did not stop learning even for a single moment. The Gemara says, source number 1, Shabbos Daf Lamed Amid Beis. And what happened was the angel of death came up with a scheme. There was a garden outside of David HaMelech's home. The Malach HaMavis, the angel of death, came and he shook the trees very hard. It made a loud noise. David HaMelech went out to see what's the source of the commotion. He was going down the steps to the garden. One of the steps slipped away. He fell and noch nafshe. And David HaMelech passed away. Because what happened was, when he fell, that moment he stopped learning. As he was walking out to hear what the commotion is going down the steps, it's clear he continued learning. But when the step fell, the shock, he stopped learning. That moment, noch nafshe, David HaMelech passes away. Here is what happens next. Open up your curriculum, source number 1. Zog de Gemara, Shabbos Lamed Amid Beis, Shabbos 30b. Sholach Shloime lebei Medrasha. His son Shloime, King Solomon, who would later become King Solomon, sends a message to the Beis Medrash, to the yeshiva, to the academy of learning. Abba meis umutal b'chama. My father died and he's lying in the sun outside. Uklavim shel beis abba re'evim. And the dogs of my father's home are hungry. Mo'eseh. What should I do? Sholchulei, they sent him back a message. Cut a carcass of a dead animal and put it before the dogs, let them eat, satiate their hunger. Va'avicha, your father, hanachalav kikar oitinoik v'taltaloi. Place on him a piece of bread or a child, and you can carry the body inside. Is it not then adequate what Shlomo HaMelech said in Koheles and Ecclesiastes, Perek Tes, chapter 9, Ki la'kelev chai hu toiv min ha'aryeh hameis. A living dog is superior to a dead lion. What is the meaning of the story? To understand the story, you have to understand the following fundamental concept known as muktzah. And that is, are the sages, the Sanhedrin, the sages, the masters of the oral tradition of Judaism, have instituted a decree on Shabbos that certain objects, certain items, we should not move on Shabbos, even though biblically, min ha-Torah, it's permissible to move them. You're not engaging directly in a labor that is forbidden on Shabbos, but the sages prohibited moving these items. This is known as muktzah items. The reasons for this is there are a few reasons. One reason is since these are items that are not needed on Shabbos. They don't have an inherent use or capability of use on Shabbos. The word muktzah means segregated. When Shabbos came in, they have been segregated from a person's mind. They're not supposed to be used. There's no inherent value for them on Shabbos. For example, money or unedible food. You can't cook it on Shabbos. You can't bake it on Shabbos. Bricks. You can't build on Shabbos, etc. So these things, the sages said, you're not allowed to move on Shabbos. As I said, there are several reasons for it. There are many categories of exactly what muktzah is, but that's beyond the parameters of this class. Generally, the idea of muktzah is that when Shabbos came in, Friday evening after sunset, what was the status of this object? If this object was something that inherently has no use on Shabbos, so then it's muktzah for the whole Shabbos. We don't move it on Shabbos. One of the things that are muktzah on Shabbos is a corpse. A dead person. A dead person has to be buried. We don't bury them on Shabbos. On Shabbos, we have nothing to do with this corpse. There's a halacha of muktzah. I'm not allowed to move a dead person on Shabbos. It's muktzah. You can touch muktzah as long as it doesn't move. But often you touch things, they move. But I'm smiling because once at my Shabbos table, I shared with my children that muktzah is you're not allowed to move it, but you can touch it. If it doesn't move, you can touch it. So of course, what was the first thing they did? They went and touched the leichter, the candlesticks where the Shabbos candles were burning, because you can touch it if you don't move it. But of course, leichters, candlesticks, when you touch them, usually they move a little bit. Okay, So a dead person you cannot move on Shabbos. So Shlomo HaMelech sends a message. Abba meis umutal b'chama. My father died. It's Shabbos. And he's open in the sun. He's outside. He's not in his room on the bed, and I don't want the body to rot. What do I do? He has a second question. The dogs of my father are hungry. What's the problem? The problem is feed them. Why can't you feed them? You ought to feed your animal on Shabbos. Animals, by the way, are muktzah. We're not now going to get into the issue with pets. There's a separate discussion, but generally an animal is muktzah on Shabbos, but I am obligated to feed my animal on Shabbos. These dogs have to be fed. But here's the issue. The literal interpretation of this Gemara was, this nevela, this carcass, yesterday, Friday, the day before Shabbos, it was alive. Let's say it was a living bird. So it wasn't made to be eaten by the dogs. It was designated for people, actually. It was a living bird, whatever they were using it for. Maybe one day they would eat it. And then say it died on Shabbos. A human being can't eat it because it's a nevela. A Jew can't eat it. It was not slaughtered. It can be eaten by dogs. But when Shabbos came in, this was not something that the Jew would use on Shabbos. It's a living bird. Just like, as we said, anything they have no use for on Shabbos becomes muktzah. That's why animals are muktzah. That's why bricks are muktzah. That's why raw flour, for example, is muktzah. Because there's nothing to do with it on Shabbos. So this animal was muktzah when Shabbos came in. Now it died Friday night or Shabbos morning. It's a carcass. What do I do? Can I carry it to give it to the dogs? Two questions of Shlomo HaMelech Shabbos sends to the Beis Medrash. What's their response? Their response is, first they respond about the dogs. What do they say? No problem. Cut a piece of the nevela and give it to the dogs. No problem of muktzah. No problem of muktzah. This is their verdict. Okay, we know there's a Mishnah in Shabbos Kuf Nun Vav, an argument between Rabbi Yehuda and Reb Shimon. Apparently their verdict here is like Reb Shimon. You could, even though it died on Shabbos, and when Shabbos came in it was muktzah, but right now it's edible food for your dogs, so therefore it's not muktzah. Take the nevela, take a piece of the meat and give it to the dogs. Item number 2, your father. What do we do? Here they told him a halacha. Take a bread. Bread you're allowed to move on Shabbos. Bread is what we eat on Shabbos. We're allowed to carry challah on Shabbos. We're talking within a private domain, within a home, within a courtyard that's exclusive. It's not muktzah. A child, you're allowed to carry a child on Shabbos in your home, in your yard, in your garden, if it's a private domain, if it's not a public domain. Place the piece of bread or child on your father, on David HaMelech, and then you can carry him in, because you're essentially carrying the corpse together with the child and with the bread. And we should say that this is a special dispensation concerning muktzah that the sages made for a mess, for a corpse, mepnei kavod hames, for the glory, for the honor of a dead person, that he shouldn't be he or she shouldn't be outside and the sun can rot the body, or if God forbid there's a fire and you want to rescue the body, it shouldn't get burned. So even though it's muktzah, they said in this case you put a child or bread on him, you can carry it. Usually with other things that are muktzah, it wouldn't help just to put something permissible on it and then pick it up. But this is a unique dispensation, and it's discussed in the Hilchas Shabbos and Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim, Simin Shin Yud Aleph 311, based on the Gemara in Shabbos, Daf Mem Gimel Amid Beis. It always bothered me, and I'm going to get to it later, that when the sages wanted to give an example, what to put on a corpse, they gave 2 examples, a piece of bread and a child. I understand a piece of bread, a child. Why would you want to take a child and put the child on a dead body? It seems a little tasteless. They couldn't find something else. A piece of bread, a piece of chicken, a vegetable that's edible, a bowl, a plate. Why a child? It seems a little distasteful, or maybe a lot distasteful, to put a child. But these are the 2 pieces of advice that they give Shlomo HaMelech. And that's why Shlomo HaMelech says in Koheles, this is when he said, a living dog is better than a dead lion. What's the connection? Zakt Rashi. Look in source number 1, the last paragraph, Zakt Rashi. Sheletakonas haklavim lo yitzrichu l'shanis tiltul nevela. Vesari hameis asula taltala de kikeritinik. To feed the dogs, to help out the dogs, the sages in the Beis Medrash did not tell him that he has to do something bizarre. He has to carry the meat to them in a bizarre, indirect way by putting something else on it. They said, no, take it and feed the dog. Why? Because since the dogs want to eat and this is edible food for them, there's no muktzah. When it came to carrying David HaMelech, a lion, but he was not living. Here they needed to give a special heter through using a child or a piece of bread. Lashon Acher, Rashi says, another explanation in David, in Shlomo HaMelech's expression that a dead lion is inferior to a living dog. Sheik dimuhu tshuvas hakelev l'tshuvas ha'aryeh. Wow. They first gave him an answer about the dog and then about the lion. He asked first about his father and then about the dogs. They first responded about the dogs and then about his father. Lashon Rabbi said, this is what I heard from my rabbis, from my teachers. This is the end of the story. I want to ask you, does it make sense that Shlomo, the son of David HaMelech, combines these two questions? His father just passed away, David HaMelech just died. He sends a message to Beis Medrash. Abba mutal bachama, my father is in the sun. I don't know what to do. Question number one. Right after that, and the dogs are hungry. How do you combine these two questions together? It seems so disrespectful to David HaMelech. Question number two. Why did Shlomo not know the law? This was not the first time in history that somebody died on Shabbos. People die, unfortunately, every day of the week, including Shabbos. David HaMelech was not the first man to die on Shabbos. And certainly was not the first dead man that had to be moved from one room to another room. Shlomo HaMelech, we know how brilliant he was. Didn't know this halacha? Some Moshe Sofer, in Chidushei Chasam Sofer, Masechta Shabbos, Daf Lamed in his commentary, in his own Chasam Sofer style, answers the question as following. It needs a little concentration. He quotes the question that's brought in the Shalah, and it's brought in other commentators. David HaMelech was wearing clothes. Clothes are not muktzah. Clothes that you can wear on Shabbos are not muktzah, because you use them on Shabbos. You're allowed to move your jacket on Shabbos. You're allowed to move your pants on Shabbos, your shirt on Shabbos. Again, in a house. Why couldn't he carry him by his clothes? What does he need, a bread and a child? Good question. Gewaldige question. The answer is, Bigdei HaMelech Asurim B'Hano. A regular citizen, ordinary citizen, is not allowed to benefit from the clothes of the king. These are the king's clothes. You can't benefit from them. You can't wear them. If you can't wear them, they're muktzah. Frektich Sam Sofer. Somebody else can't wear them, but Shlomo is his successor. Shlomo is the man who's sitting on the throne, taking over his father. He can benefit from the royal clothings of his father. He'll carry in the body. For him, it's not muktzah. They told him, it's not like he's using somebody else to carry in the body. The taltala, you can carry in the body. For him, the clothes are not muktzah, he's going to wear them. Sagt Chasam Sofer, Shlomo realized that this would not work for him. And the reason it won't work for him is for the following reason. Why suddenly were the dogs hungry today? Where were the dogs yesterday? Why did dogs get hungry now? Shlomo HaMelech said to himself, they were always hungry. And they were fed. But as long as David HaMelech was alive, there was something unique going on. And it's not happening now. And that is, right now I see I have no food for these dogs, and the only food I have for these dogs have an issue of muktzah. According to Rabbi Yehuda, one day it would be mamish muktzah, because on Erev Shabbos, Bein HaShmoshes, Friday evening, it was muktzah. There's a principle in Chazal, Ha'ein HaKadosh Baruch Hu mevi takol letzadikim. God guards the moral and spiritual integrity of tzaddikim, even their animals. There's a story about the donkey of Reb Pinchas ben Yair, the great Talmudic sage, who would not eat something that was questionable from a kosher point of view. Perhaps it was untithed. Perhaps, it wasn't even certainly untithed. It was a question of who was untithed, and his donkey wouldn't eat it. Here, suddenly, because the dogs have to eat, he's being subjected to a great problem of muktzah. If it's a question when something might be untithed and still the donkey would not eat it, because animals are sensitive to energy. Animals have sometimes psychic qualities. The animal of a tzaddik would not touch certain food. And here, he's confronted with a problem. It's not just a suffix. It may be mamash, a prohibition of muktzah. And then he realized this never happened before. He's not worthy of succeeding his father. He's not on that level of righteousness. If that's the case, the clothes are muktzah. If the clothes are muktzah, how can he carry out his father? How can he carry in his father? That's why he asked the questions together. My father died and he's in the sun. Problem number 2 is I can't carry him by his clothes because the dogs are hungry, and that means I'm unworthy to take him over. So what should I do? So they told him, first of all, you can give it to the dogs. It's not a problem. It's a suffix problem. It may be a problem. Even though you're allowed to, it may be a problem. And why did it happen to him? They said, if you're worried about that, put a piece of bread on your father and carry him in. That's what the Chum Sofer explains. But the question is, I think there's still something missing, because what do you mean? Shlomo HaMelech was worthy of succeeding his father. God wanted him to succeed his father. Shlomo was the righteous successor of his father, and we know was worthy of it. If that's the case, the Chachamim could have said, no worries, take the clothes. Take him in with the clothes. Now, this above question in Talmud has been discussed. It's been discussed in many books. I want to give tonight one perspective, one explanation. I compiled it from many places, primarily the Sefer Eretz HaChaim on Tehillim Chav Beis, the commentary of the Ben Ish Chai, Rabbi of Baghdad, Iraq, Rabbeinu Yosef Chaim, on Shabbos Daf Lamed, Shal Sutshuvas Tirosh V'Yitzer, Shal Sutshuvas She'elas Chemdas Tzvi, and a little booklet that I have in my home that contains some writings of a great rabbi, a great Russian rabbi. His name was Rabbi Avraham Eliyahu, Rabbi Avraham Ela Plotkin. What's interesting is I was preparing the class, and I was walking in the street, and I met an old teacher of mine, Rabbi Yisrael Friedman, and I asked him if he has an insight on this piece of Talmud about David and Shlomo. So he said, I want to tell you something. I was a child in the 1940s in Paris, and it was Shavuos. And the rabbi was Rabbi Avraham Ela Plotkin, who was a genius. He was a great Torah giant. He had smicha. He was ordained by the Rogachover Gaon, who wrote quite impressive things on him. And the Rogachover, Rabbi Yosef Rosen, was not very complimentary of many people. Rabbi Avraham Ela was a Chabad Chassid and a great Gaon. And so Rabbi Yisrael Friedman tells me I was a child, Paris, Shavuos, and Rabbi Plotkin gave up and he gave a drasha. And I remember as a child that he explained the Gemara beautifully. I said, "No, what did he say?" He said, "I don't remember." I went to my house right afterwards, and I have a little booklet that his grandson, Rabbi Plotkin's grandson from Toronto, who carries his name, Rabbi Avraham Ela Plotkin as well. He's the Chabad ambassador to in Toronto, Markham. And he gave me a few years ago a little booklet that he published with some writings of his grandfather, a little pink booklet. So I found it on my shelf. I reached out for it, I opened it up, and I saw there's a piece on this Gemara on Shabbos. And I realized perhaps that was the speech he gave in the 1940s in Paris. And there it was written, although written very briefly and concisely. And from there I also culled some of the thoughts I'm going to present. Plus I'm adding some additional thoughts that, at least in a speculative way, I think may have merit to them in this fascinating discussion of exploring the story in Gemara. As always in Torah, things can be understood on many levels, from many point of views, on many layers. The depth of Torah is infinite and extraordinary, both in its depth and in its breadth, and in the fact that it's multi-layered and multi-dimensional. And sometimes a question and an answer, a story, can be understood on different levels and different planes and different worlds from different perspectives, and they're all true. And this has been suggested by many a commentator, that the story is so absurd. The way Shlomo HaMelech presents the question and the way he gets the answer, it's so strange. It must be that there is a metaphor, an allegory that is being presented here. The question is, what is it? David HaMelech, as you know perhaps, we would say was a very, very controversial figure in his lifetime. Very controversial. What has been said about him, it was unbelievable. The amount of agony he endured from his enemies was profound, and he had many, many enemies. And this is because of his life story. The first issue was his Jewishness was questioned. So here you have a king, the most powerful person of the nation, representing the entire nation, but they're not questioning if he's a good king, if he's a bad king, if he's selfish, if he's kind. They're questioning if he's Jewish. The Gemara in Yevamos Daf Ayin Vav, and we discussed this at length in last year in our classes on Rus, which you can find on the yeshiva.net. A sword in the base medrash, Yevamos Ayin Vav, Doyeg tells Shaul, stop asking if he's worthy for kingship. Why don't you ask him, Roi Lavai B'Kol, if he's worthy of being a Jew? Because his grandmother, David's father, was Yishai. Yishai's father was Oived. Oived's mama was Rus HaMoaviyah, came from Moabite. The pasuk says in Kiseitze Lo Yavai Amoini Umayavi B'Kahal Hashem. An Ammonite and Moabite can convert to Judaism, but they cannot marry into the Jewish people forever, even generations later. So David HaMelech's very Jewishness was being questioned. And we know that it came to the Beis Medrash and they were about to give out a verdict that David HaMelech's Jewishness is not legitimate. Until there was a dramatic scene, it was established that the Torah is talking about male Ammonites and Moabites, not female. Rus was a female. But this was not a simple issue, and it recurred and reoccurred and resurfaced many, many generations, as discussed at length in our classes, our shiurim on the book of Ruth, the book of Megillas Ruth that is also learned and read on Shavuos. That's number one. Number two, his own son Avshalom rebelled against him. Didn't just rebel against him, hunted him down and almost killed him. Not only that, morally disgraced him publicly, cohabited with the concubines of his father, as discussed in the Tanakh in quite detail. His close advisor, the most wisest man of the generation, Achisofel, rebelled against David, schemed, advised Avshalom, suggested to Avshalom to kill him. Achisofel was one of the leading strategists who turned against David HaMelech. At the end, he committed suicide at a young age. Achisofel's story, wow, what an amazing story. The family of Shaul, the family of King Saul, despised him. And then there's the story of Bathsheba. That very, very complex story, which is beyond the parameters of this class, where David HaMelech sees a woman, Bathsheba, who's married to a man named Uriah, and he lives with her. Ultimately, he would marry her, have children with her. The Gemara says, Kol hayoytzi lemelchemes beis David get krisis kaisav leishtam. Any man who went out was mobilized and drafted to a war. For David HaMelech would first write a divorce, so legally Uriah was divorced. But the odor of immorality was there and it was conspicuous. And David HaMelech, for the rest of his life, would be repenting because of the story of Bathsheba. The Sanhedrin, the most important body of the Jewish people, the Gemara says in Tractate Sanhedrin Daf Kuf Zayin, the Sanhedrin Pirish Mimenu. They separated from David HaMelech. And David HaMelech was a great scholar. They separated from him. They didn't want to have anything to do with him. By the way, Achisofel was Bathsheba's grandfather. And one Medrash says that this was the reason Achisofel carried such animosity to David and he wanted him killed as a revenge for what he did against Bathsheba. Again, we're not discussing this story in our class at the moment. Everybody had something to say about David HaMelech. The Gemara says in Yuma, Daf Chav Beis, Yuma 22, that David HaMelech is the symbol of that leader, that Kupa shal shrotzim talilei me'achayrav, a box filled with dead rodents is hanging down his back, and at any point somebody can tell him, turn around and look how many skeletons you carry. The Gemara says in Sanhedrin Daf Kuf Zayin that in the middle of learning, people would turn to David HaMelech to embarrass him, and they would ask him this question: David, habal eshes ish misasi b'ma. If somebody has relations with a married woman, what type of death penalty does he deserve? You understand what they were asking? And David HaMelech would answer, misasi b'chenek. There's a death penalty, strangulation. But yesh lechelik leilam haba. He experiences a part in the next world. Embarrassing somebody else in public. You don't have a part in the world to come. Many more things. David HaMelech was a figure who had a lot of enemies. Read the Tehillim. If you ever read the book of Psalms, even superficially, read how many chapters are dedicated to David HaMelech. David HaMelech's crying out to God, save me, rescue me, I need you, I'm here with you. You're my only hope in this world that has alienated me and estranged me and cut me down and hunted me down. You think David HaMelech was a mighty warrior, and he was. He reunited the Jewish world. He conquered Eretz Yisrael. He completed a lot of its conquest. He conquered many countries. He conquered Yerushalayim. He prepared the building of the Beis Hamikdash. The father of the dynasty of Beis David, the grandfather of Mashiach, and so forth. But there was also tremendous pain and suffering that David HaMelech endured. He became a leper. He fasted for many years. He lost many of his children. Avshalom was killed. Another child was killed by Avshalom. The first child he had from Bathsheba died. Now let's come to the story. David HaMelech dies on Shabbos. He's walking down a step. Step falls. Stopped learning. The angel of death take him. Shlomo HaMelech sends a message to the Beis Medrash. Abba meis umutal b'chama. My father died, and he's lying in the sun. He didn't die a natural death. He died a very unnatural death. He died a strange death, and he died a very undignified death. He's walking down the steps. A step slips out, and he falls down. What is this similar to? This is similar to the death penalty of skila. Skila, when somebody received skila, it wasn't easy. But when somebody received skila, which means stoning, first he was thrown down. And often died from that. Very often died from that. And this death resembled skila. Furthermore, the Gemara says in Moed Katan Daf Chav Ches Amud Aleph, and you have to remember as a preface, this is a time when the punishments discussed in Torah are still very valid in the sense that they play themselves out in reality. After the destruction of the temple already, the Mishnah says in Pirkei Avos, Ein biyadeinu lo mishalvos harishayim v'lo misuriyat tzadikim. We understand very little about righteous suffering and wicked prospering. The Gemara says in Moed Katan Daf Chaf Chesam Amud Aleph, discussing the death of Reb Huna, that when somebody before 80 dies suddenly, it's a simin ra. It's not a good sign. David HaMelech didn't die in his bed from illness. He died suddenly. Pisoim. Abba Meis or Mutal Bacham is outside. He was walking outside. He wasn't sick in bed. And he died suddenly. The Gemara Moed Katan, it's a bad siman. He fell down. It looks like skilla. Shlomo HaMelech is concerned. What's the meaning of this? What does this mean about my father? Is this a message about my father that I didn't know? And then he adds, and this is a continuation, it's not a separate question. The next question is, Klovim shall beis abareivim. There are dogs who are hungry. They bark and they're hungry. And this is a metaphor for those dogs surrounding my father's home, who always barked, but they're hungry. They're hungry for the gossip of David. They're hungry for character assassination after his death, equally to during his life. They're hungry to prove that David was evil, that David was self-centered, that David was a tyrant, that David was cruel and heartless. Klovim. And here we come to the famous teaching of the Arizal. On the pasuk at the end of Matos, Vayikra lo noivach bishmoi. Zog the Arizal, lo is lashon hara. Noivach is barking. People who speak lashon hara are considered they're akin to barking dogs that bark and sometimes they bite. That's what gossip is. Gossip is a barking dog, and the Arizal tells us that misapre lashon hara misgalgelim bekelev. People who gossip, they make a career of gossiping and slandering. When their souls are reincarnated after their death, their souls are often reincarnated into a dog. Vayikra lo noivach. The law, the lashon hara, is reincarnated into noivach, into a barking dog. The Chida explains this. Reb Chaim Yosef David Azulai, the great Italian sage and rabbi of the 18th century, explains this in his commentary, Pesach Einayim in Parshas Matas, based on the teachings of the Gurei Hari, the lions, the students of the Arizal. So Shlomo HaMelech says, Klovim shall beis abareivim, the dogs, the Balei Lashon Hara are hungry for more gossip about David HaMelech. And what's more, now they can really gossip, they can legitimize it, they can say, look how he died, look where he died, look under what circumstances he died, as explained. They can legitimize their gossip. Shlomo HaMelech is concerned about one more thing, namely, I'm a young boy. Shlomo was 12 years old when David HaMelech died. Young kid. Now they can take revenge. The first person they'll take revenge is of the potential successor, Shlomo HaMelech. Now that David died, and he died suddenly, and he died without preparation, now, finally, they will be able to cut down David's character, and they'll be able to cut down Shlomo in his youth. So Shlomo is in a terrible, terrible dilemma. This is a fateful crossroad in his life and in the future of the Jewish people. And what does he do? Shalach lebeis medrash. He sends a message to the Beis Medrash. He wants to know, what do the Sanhedrin have to say about it. Shalach lebeis medrash. Ayid asks the Beis Medrash. He opens up a Torah. He sends to the Sanhedrin, to the great sages. Tell me, what do you make of the situation? The first thing they told him was, cut a nevela and give it to the dogs. You see, there are two types of dogs, they explained to him. There's a dog that is very loyal. There's a dog that serves its master loyally and eats its master's food and is really dedicated, heart and soul, to its master. In fact, the word kelev, it says in Kabbalah, is a combination of two words. Kuloi leiv, all heart. Some dogs are very loyal, but then there are other dogs. There are dogs, we'll call them opportunists. They will wiggle their tail to anybody they feel can give them something. They will appease anybody and everything as long as you can give them what they want. They will become loyal to you. They will demonstrate their love and loyalty. There are literally such types of dogs. They'll wiggle their tail to anybody and smile to you and become your best friend as long as you give them what they want. And when somebody else gives them, it could be your enemy. They don't care. They go where the opportunity lies. This is what the Sanhedrin told David HaMelech. Shlomo HaMelech. Don't worry. Take an avela and feed these dogs. And you don't have to worry. They'll become your friends. They'll stop gossiping. They won't take revenge from you. Because you have to understand, they are inherently opportunists. They're craving a career. They don't hate your father David HaMelech because a pasuk. Lo yavei amoini mo yavi bekal Hashem. The pasuk is a smokescreen. The pasuk is a disguise. The pasuk is a cover-up. Give them an avela. Feed them. Announce that you're going to change the style of government and you'll give them careers. And they'll be elevated. And when they smell the avela, they smell the opportunity. They'll embrace you. They're not people who care if Kol HaYotze L'Melchemes Beis David get Krisis Kaisel L'Yishto or not. They're opportunists. These are a type of klavim. You give them an avela, they'll be quiet, they won't bother you, they won't take revenge. Perhaps one commentator suggests they were saying something else. Give the gossipers a piece of nevela. Teach them something. The Orchos Tzadikim writes in Lashon Hara, the section on Lashon Hara, Shar Lashon Hara. He tells a story about a pious man who was walking with his students and they went by a carcass of an animal. And the students said, Rebbe, it stinks. The Rebbe looked at it and said, look how white and bright its teeth are. And then he said, even a nevela, you don't have to focus on the negative. You could focus on the positive. Lama lo yamartem hashvach va'amartem hagnai. Why do you have to focus on the disgraceful? Focus on the positive. The Gemara says in Chulin, there's a bird called ra'ah. Why is it called ra'ah? It's the same bird like Aya, Daya. She stands in Babylonia. Babylonia is like 500 miles from Israel. 500 kilometers or miles. She stands in Babylonia and she sees a carcass in the land of Israel. Raw, tremendous vision. So what's wrong? Why is she a non-kosher animal? Why is she a non-kosher animal? The Torah gives a name to describe a characteristics which seems very positive. Eyesight. One of the answers is, you're standing in Babylonia, you're looking at the land of Israel, you could see many things in the land of Israel. What do you see? You see an avela in Eretz Israel. From everything in the land of Israel, the only thing you can see is an avela? It's because you're an avela. It's because you're not kosher. Because if you were kosher and you would look at the land of Israel, there might be an avela, there might be dead, smelly carcasses there. But there's so much holiness there. When somebody looks at somebody else, at a movement, at a group, and at an organization, at a community of Jews, and the only thing they could see is an avela, they have to look in the mirror. The Chassid says, Archis Tzadikim. Why do you have to speak about the negative? So they said, give the dogs an avela. Even with an avela, we're taught in our sources not to gossip. Never mind your king, never mind David HaMelech. So that's the first thing. Give the dogs an avela. Now they continue. And they said, as far as you're concerned about your father, your true concern, your legitimate concern about your father, you don't have to worry. Place a piece of bread or a child on your father. So one of the commentators explains, the Gemara says in Masechta Saita, Misha Nichshal Be'eshes Ish, Soifai Lavalade Ani is the beginning of Tractate Saita. Somebody who has promiscuous relations with a woman who's already married. he'll die in poverty. He's going to become a man of poverty. And the Gemara brings the pasuk, Ki isha zoyne bat kikar lechem. As a result of his promiscuity, he's going to be begging for a piece of bread. And look, your father died, and he has bread on him. A lot of bread. He died with tremendous wealth. The second thing, the Chazal say that somebody who has promiscuous relationships, loy nin veloy nechet, he dies without descendants. But take a look, your father has so many children and great children and descendants that come from him. Furthermore, you're worried about your father. Perhaps your father wasn't so righteous, wasn't so great, wasn't so holy. Let's analyze your father. The leader of Jews, a Manig Yisrael, a king among Jewish people, is responsible for the entire welfare of his nation, which basically is categorized in two dimensions. Number one, to take care of their material needs, and number two, to guide them in their moral needs, because a human being is both a body and a soul, a body and a mind, a body and a conscience. We have material needs and we have moral needs, spiritual needs. That's also part of the human experience, despite Marxism. What do we know about David HaMelech? We know the Gemara in Brachas. Take a look in your source. Zog the Gemara in Brachas, Dav Gimel Amid Beis. David HaMelech used to learn from midnight. Beautiful description. He would wake up at midnight and he would learn all night. This was the king. Kivon Shalom Uda Shachar, when dawn would break, Nichnesu Chachme Yisrael, the sages of Israel went in V'yamru and they said, Adonenu HaMelech, our master the king, Amcha Yisrael Tzrichim Parnasa, your nation Israel needs livelihood. And that's when David HaMelech told them, go support each other. And then the conversation continued, how to support the people. This was every single morning at dawn, as the new day ascended upon the horizon. David HaMelech had to put his mind and soul into the question of how to feed his people. How to give them bread. And then the next page, look in the next source, Brachas Daf Dalet Amud Aleph. Brachas 4a. What did David HaMelech tell Hashem? Shamra nafshi ki chassid ani, I'm a pious man. Shekol malchei mizrachamaydev yoshvim agudas b'chvoidam. All the nations in the east and the west sit in groups and wallow in their own glory. V'ani yodai miluchlacha is bedam u'b'shafir u'b'shalya. My hands are dirty, are soiled with blood, with embryos, and with afterbirths. With those things that come out of the mother after the birth of the child, meaning the amniotic sac, the placenta. Kedei l'taher isha l'bayla, in order to determine that the woman is ritually pure and could be together with her husband. David HaMelech was a great sage. He wasn't only a great king. And one of the fundamental institutions of Judaism is called Taras HaMishpacha, family purity. And for this, the sages have to determine what type of blood makes one pure, what type of blood makes one not impure, makes one impure. Especially it's complicated when it comes to the time of birth. And here he says, my hands are dirty with blood, with embryos, with amniotic sacs and placentos. Why? My responsibility is, my responsibility is to maintain the wholesomeness of a Jewish family, the integrity of a Jewish marriage, the purity of intimacy, that pure children should be born based on the laws of family purity, which are essential to the purity and the wholesomeness of the children. These are the laws of mikveh, the laws of separation, the laws of intimacy, as discussed in Jewish law. Vital for the longevity of a marriage and the respect between husband and wife, where nobody is only an object, but rather each one is a person to respect who is entitled to maintain their space and their dignity. This also is beyond the parameters of the class, the details of family purity, but this is what David HaMelech says. So the sages sent a message to Shlomo and said, look at your father. His whole life he was busy with giving them bread and making sure that they have children and healthy and wholesome and holy and pure and beautiful children. On your father there's the bread and there's the child. So you don't have to worry about your father. He was a Maneg Yisrael par excellence. He was completely dedicated to his duty and responsibility to be there for his people. And we know what the Sifri says in Bamidbar Chav Zayin when God tells Moshe to take Yehoshua. Kach es Yehoshua, take Yehoshua to appoint him as a successor. Vayikach es Yehoshua, it says, Lokchai b'dvarim. He took him with words and he told him about the great reward that awaits Jewish leaders in the future world. Shlomo, you don't have to worry about your father, from how he died, from the step, from the way he died, from the fact that it's in the sun outside, from all the gossip and the slander throughout his life. There's the bread and the child that testify that he can be carried. He can be transported straight into Olam Haba, into the highest levels of paradise and of the world to come. And then perhaps there is something more. Shlomo HaMelech is concerned with something else. David didn't stop learning. David was a mighty warrior. He fought many wars. He was a great warrior. But he knew that the success of Jewish destiny is based on Torah and on learning Torah. And as long as the Jews don't stop learning and don't sever their relationship with Torah, they won't die. Collectively, they won't die, like the famous metaphor Rabbi Akiva gives in Masechta Brachas, Daf Samach Aleph, to Papas ben Yehuda, why he's teaching Torah under the threat of Roman persecution and death. Because it's like, without Torah, you're taking the fish out of water. David knows this personally. He knows that if he doesn't stop learning, he doesn't die. Which is a metaphor for the Jewish people. If we don't stop learning, we don't die. And yet Shabbos came, and the step falls, and David falls, and he stops learning, and he dies. And Shlomo sends a message to the Beis Medrash. Abba meis umutal b'chama. My father died, he's exposed. The dogs are hungry to devour him, to devour me, to devour us. This is a question about the Jewish future, a question about Jewish destiny. And you know what they tell him? They tell him, you saying your father died and therefore he can't be moved. Let me tell you something. If you put on top of your father a piece of bread or a child, he's not considered immobile. Taltala, you could move him around as though he was a living object, as though he is not dead, he's alive. Because when you see that a dead person has on him a child, the dead person, the person who passed away, has children who continue the legacy, the path, the ideals, the values, the lifestyle of the father, then the father continues to remain something that's dynamic and alive and vibrant in the life of the children and the students and the pupils and the people that he or she inspired and changed. It's known that neshamas, when people were living here, were called mahalchim. Malachim are called oimdim. The pasuk says in Chayav and Asati lechem mahalchim bein oimdim ha'ela. Neshamas, human beings, are considered mobile. Angels stand in one place. Even their growth is within one orbit. When somebody dies and they're not in this world anymore, the soul departs. It's not a mahalech, it's an oimeit. Now it's in a fixed place. The ability for transformation, for radical movement is only in this world. In that world, you're in one place and you can't change. You can't say, I want to change from purgatory to paradise. Here you can transform yourself. You can make radical changes in your life. Transitional changes, but there's a possibility for transformation, for growth. Mahalchim. But when a person passes away, that ability ceases. However, when they have a child, So through the child, they remain a mahalech, they remain mobile and dynamic. This is intimated in the words of our sages, Brakara davua. A son is the knee, the leg of the father. Why the leg? Why not the heart? Why not the mind? Because the leg allows us to move. A father dies, he still has a mind. He still has a heart. But the legs are not there. The movement is not there. It's not dynamic anymore. It's static. Through the children, the father moves. He's a mahalich. David HaMelech can be moved. There's kinderlach. They say, Shloime, look at you. As long as there will be children who are learning Torah. David didn't die. In fact, who is the king upon whom we say? The only king. We say it in the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah. We say it in Kiddush Levana. David Melech Yisrael. Chai v'kayim. What do you mean chai v'kayim? He died. There's a child in David, on David. David created children, he created students. V'shinantam levanech elu hatalmidim. This Sifri says, and Rashi quotes it, biological students, biological children and spiritual children. Then v'taltla, he's not immobile. Number two, if there's bread, if somebody gives charity, if somebody helps other people, physically or spiritually, with money, with Torah, with inspiration, with love, with a smile. The pasuk in Mishlei compares Torah to bread. The Torah speaks and says, L'chu lachmu belachmi. Come partake, come eat your bread through my bread. The Torah says, I'm bread. Wisdom is bread. You internalize it, it becomes part of you. So the bread is physical, it's also spiritual. As long as you give bread, as long as you learn Torah, you teach Torah, you give bread, you give tzedakah, you help people. Physical bread or spiritual bread, then you don't die. This is what they told Shloime. It's true about David. It's also true about our future. David represents the people. As long as there's bread, as long as you're giving tzedakah, the Jewish people care for each other and are giving and are sharing, and there's children, they don't die. I once heard in the name of the Panovich Rav Kahanman, and he said as follows. He said, what's considered an orphaned family? A family that loses its parents, God forbid. What's considered an orphan generation? A generation that doesn't lose its parents, but that loses its children. That's an orphan generation. And that's why Shlomo HaMelech says, Toiv kelev chai me'aryeh meis. A lion that's alive is better, a dog that's alive is better than a lion that's dead. The Maharal explains. Death is absence. Life is reality. If there's bread, if there's a child, there's life. David continues through them. It could be, maybe that's a deeper spiritual homiletical reason why when the Chachamim wanted to say you could move a dead person, they gave two metaphors, bread and a child. Why would you put a child and a dead person? Perhaps there's a spiritual message here. And that is, if you want the dead man to move, if you want him to remain mobile and vibrant, make sure there's children. Invest in the children. Because the children outlive you. The children are the link to eternity. Education is the most important thing. And here it's my duty to mention that during this time is the yahrzeit of my dear father, who passed away on the 20th day of Iyar, Chaf Iyar, Tovshin Samachei, 2005, May 2005. Tehei nishmas tzrura b'tzur hachayim. We see this especially with David HaMelech concerning the little book that he composed called Tehillim. That book of Tehillim, the 150 chapters in the book of Psalms, is something extraordinary in the sense that David HaMelech composed those chapters, those Psalms, together with the other 9 people from whom, as Chazal tell us, the 9 people together with David who composed the Psalms of Tehillim. But as the commentators have pointed out throughout the generations, and we have seen this true in Jewish history, that Tehillim remained a book that wasn't only written by David HaMelech at a certain point in history, but was being and continues to be rewritten by scores of Jewish women, men, and children. Jews found in Tehillim their source of comfort, of solace, of inspiration. Whatever type of problem or crisis a Jew endured. On the other hand, whatever exhilarating, joyous experience a Jew experienced, he opened the Tehillim and he saw in it a mirror, a reflection of his or her own life. We know how some of our grandmothers, how some of our mothers did not depart from the Tehillim. The Tehillim accompanied them from breakfast to dinner, from dawn till midnight. Till after midnight, they were there with the Tehillim. In Tehillim, they saw their own story, their own narrative. In Tehillim, they screamed about injustice, and they protested about the darkness of the world, and they cried to God, Ad Mosai tisoser lanetzach, how long will you be concealed? And they celebrated the triumph of the human spirit. And they articulated the depth of their faith in God and their intimate relationship with God. David Melech Yisrael, indeed, Chai v'Kayab, in the Tehillim, David is there. And every Jew re-experiences it. It's not a dead book, God forbid. It's dynamic. Because he gave us the bread of Torah. And he gave us the children. Hanach alav kikir etinek v'taltalai. And carry him. And because of that, David Melech Yisrael, Chai v'Kayam, together with the nation that he represents. Have a wonderful evening.